All right, Rabbi, say good morning. First of all, Mazel Tov on the Siyum. Masechet Shalom is actually very exciting. 2 Siyumim in one weekend. We had a Siyum yesterday by the Kiddush, another Siyum Baruch Hashem today. We're open for Siyum sponsors for tomorrow. You know, if you like. I was an incredible Yashkal Chalavai. We should be Zocha to always make Siyum after Siyum. And Yirtzeh Hashem for many years to come. So we'll say we begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar, Yona Shushie Ehrenfeld, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drushos this month. Le'iloi nishmas, Yona's grandfather, Yosef ben Shmuel Aron, and Mark Karstadt for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this month in memory of his mother, Chana Bas Shragai. The Week of Learning sponsors the Meirowitz family as a zechus for a successful medical procedure for Sue Meirowitz, Shulamis Tova Bas Mindel. We continue to pray. To daven for Sue's complete refuah shalema, and the Grossman family for dedicating the Week of Learning as a zechus for refuah shalema for Miriam Chana Bas Ida. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all those who need a refuah shall have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Now, with that, let us begin. An incredible and overwhelming and riveting daf today with some good halacha, some good hashkafa, a little bit of everything. So, also with that, let us begin. Although, what happened to my halacha and my hashkafa? Okay, good. Well, see, with that, let us begin. We'll come. I think I forgot it home. It's okay. All right, so there might just be good Gemara, no riveting halacha and hashkafa. That's all right. So with that, let us begin. So today's daf is daf Zayin 7, and we are picking up. Where did we get up to yesterday? Oh, we got to Zayin. Good. Amar of Sheshes. Good. Excellent. Good. So Amar of Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes says as follows. So remember again, just reorient ourselves a little bit. In yesterday's daf, we got started on the incredible machlokes, and the incredible machlokes Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes regarding Tuma Hutra B'tzibor, Tuma Duchuya B'tzibor, which I will say is really one. We've seen this machlokes. We saw it in Shkalim. We saw it certainly in Pesachim. The fundamental idea that we know that communal service, avodas tzibor, definitely has the ability to override certain halachos of tumah. The shaila is, how do we understand the mechanics of that? Is it a din in hotra? So do we see that when it comes to avodas tzibor, communal service, if there's a tumah issue, the laws of tumah are as if they don't exist, hotra, or do we say dechuya? Dechuya means they exist, but we kind of set them aside. What's the nafkamina between these two approaches? So we've already seen, or in yesterday's daf, the nafkamina would be, do you have to search out kohanim who are tahorim? Do you have to go ahead, or can you say whenever it comes to communal service, the laws of tumah are simply as if they don't exist? It says the Gemara, Amar Rav Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes says, Mina Amin Allah. From where do I know that so remember, Rav Sheshes is the one who says Dechuya. So from where do I know that it's Dechuya, not Hutra? So here we go. It goes to this incredible Desanya. Hayo Omidu Makriv Minchasa Omer. How incredible is this? Today's the 21st day of the Omer. So the Kohen goes ahead and he's ready to offer up the Karban Omer. Karban Omer was a barley offering. So what happens? V'nitmes biyada. Now, both say, imagine for a moment the barley itself becomes tameh. So now we have a tumah issue with the barley. So what's the halacha? Omer, so the Gemara says, Omer umavien acheres tachtau. So not a problem. We could always, if we could find replacement barley, just utilize replacement barley to go ahead and halacha lemaisa, to go ahead and try to bring replacement barley in order to go ahead and offer up the karban. Vim ein sham elihi. What happens if halacha lemaisa? What happens if there's no other barley? So both say, remember again, what happens if there's no other replacement barley? What do we do there? Listen to this line, and if you're using your own Gemara, underline it. Omrim lo, we say to him, have a pikeach ushtok. Be smart and be quiet. Let's say words to live by, right? Be smart and be quiet. So in other words, what are we telling the Kohen? We're telling him, listen, there is no other barley. There is no other barley. This is it. So don't say anything about the tumah and just offer it up. Now both say, besides the incredible profundity in those words, what do you see from here? Both say, when the barley becomes tameh, what's the first order of business? What's the first step? See if we can find something tar, which tells you what? Katani miha Omer umavien acheres tachtel. So I will say, you see from the, remember, if you would hold that tumah is hutra b'tzibor, and the barley became tameh, what do you have to do about the tameh barley? Nothing. You just offer it up. Because Tumah B'tzibor means, when it comes to communal service, we pretty much ignore the halachos of Tumah. The fact that we're saying, let's see if we could find some tahar barley, tells us that halacha l'maisa Tumah D'choye B'tzibor. And if there's the ability to go ahead and utilize tahar barley, we're going to absolutely do that. It's only in the event that we don't have any more barley, we say to the guy, listen, be quiet, and just offer up what you've got. So again, Rav Shesha says, you clearly see from here that halacha l'maisa, Rav Nachman says, you see from here that halacha l'maisa, Rav Shesha says, you see from here that halacha l'maisa Tumah D'chuya B'tzibor. Some Rav Nachman, but I will say, just before we go on to the halacha piece, all kidding aside, Omrim lo have pikiach ushtok. We'll say all of us have circumstances in life where we look back at situations and we say to ourselves, I didn't need to say anything. Right? It would have been so much better had I just held my tongue. I thought it was such a good line. I thought it was such a good statement. I thought it was such a necessary piece of input. And then it turns out after the fact, I would have been much happier and I would have had much less agmas nefesh had I not said anything. It's like what the Gemara says, that if a word is worth one selah, then silence is worth two. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk. Of course, we all have meaningful and appropriate things to contribute. But Chazal often sensitize us to is to think before we speak and to weigh the words that we are going to share. Because sometimes what we have to say is meaningful, impactful, and necessary, and other times we'd be better off employing the wise wisdom of Chazal, of Hevi Pikeach. Sometimes the greatest manifestation of wisdom is not in the spoken word, but it is in the ability to remain silent. So Amr Rav Nachman, so we'll say, what is Rav Nachman going to do with this? Rav Nachman, Modina Heicha Di'ika Shirayim La'achila. So we'll say, this is very important. Rav Nachman, who holds Tumah Hutra B'tzibor, right? Rav Nachman will say, I agree in a case of Shirayim. See, Rabbi will say, there are different types of karbanos. There are some communal offerings which are totally offered up on the Mizbeach. But then there's another type of karban, which is like, for example, karban omer, where what do you offer up on the Mizbeach? Just the kamitza. And then the rest of the omer is consumed by the kohanim. Rav Nachman will say, even I who hold Tumah Hutra B'tzibor will agree that when there is Shem, because also remember again, let's go back to our Pesachim days. Also, do you remember this case? 51% of Klal Yisrael is Tameh. What do we do about Pesach? Little Daf Yomi. What do we do about Pesach? Offer it up. What don't we do? Eat it. See, Rabbi said this is very important. Tumah Hutra B'tzibor means you can offer the karban. Tumah Hutra B'tzibor does not allow you to consume anything in a state of tumah for one simple reason, which is what Tumah Hutra B'tzibor allows you to do, the necessary components of the avoda, the hakrav on the mizbeach, the zrikas hadam, the sprinkling of the blood. Consumption, eating, is not a necessary part of the karbanic process. So interesting enough, Rav Nachman will say, listen, it's true, I hold Tumah Hutra B'tzibor, but any carbon that has a shirayim, any carbon that has a consumption aspect, of course, if you could find something ritually pure to offer up, that of course is better. Because again, if you offer up the carbon omer in a state of tumah, as much as you can do that, you can't eat it. So therefore, again, Rav Nachman says, I agree with this particular brisa of Uzal. Of course, try to find tahar barley. This way, halacha l'maisa, you can go ahead and eat the shirayim as well. So the Gemara says, Meisei is another kasha. Hayim akriv minchas parim ve'elim ukvasim v'nitmeis biyado. If he was offering up mincha or minchas parim, we'll see what these karbanos are. Elim kvasim v'nitmeis biyado, and they became tamei. Omer umavian acheres. The Kohen should say, listen, my carbon became tameh, and they'll bring a replacement of something tar. Vim ein sham elohi. What happens if there are no other replacement karbanos? All you have are these particular karbanos. So what's the halacha? Omrim lo havi pikach ushtok. We tell the Kohen, be wise and be quiet. So we'll say again, what do you see from here? You see from here, this is a kasha on Rav Nachman, right? So again, or support for Rav Sheshes. So you see over here that Tumah D'chuya B'tzibor. V'haraya, when these karbanos come up, if they become tamei, the first order of business is, let's find a tahar replacement. It's only in the event that I can't find a tahar replacement, that what? That halacha l'maisa will use something tamei. To which the Gemara says, my lav parim ve'elim ukvasim dechag. Are we not talking about over here Yom Tiv karbanos? Elim, kvasim, the rams, the sheep, that don't offer up as part of the karbanos of any of the regalim. So these are again karbanos tzibor. Yet we don't say Tuma Hutra B'tzibor, we say Tuma Dechuya B'tzibor, and therefore when they become Tamei, we try to find a replacement. Rav Nachman, no. Rav Nachman says, no, that's not the case. In fact, the case that we're discussing over here is Parim Para Avodah Zarah. The particular Parim, right, the cows in question, is speaking about, again, the Par of Avodah Zarah. So we'll say this is talking about a situation, if you take a look at Rashi, Par da Avodah Zarah, the Tzibor Olehi, Utu'una Nesachim B'Shach L'chal. So we'll say this is talking about a situation where Halacha L'maisa, the Sanhedrin, made a mistake in a Dvar Halacha, which led to a communal instance of Avodah Zarah. So there's a special par that's brought to atone for that. Afal Gab Ditziburhu, Kevan Delo Kavia Leizman Mahadrinan. So I will say, now Rav Nachman is introducing us to something else. See, it's true. Rav Nachman holds Tuma Hutra B'tzibor, which we always interpret it to mean. Now, whenever it comes to a communal service, the laws of Tuma are totally, fundamentally non-existent. We now begin to see qualifications to Rav Nachman's ruling. So qualification number one is shirayim. When there's a consumption component. When there's a consumption component, we'll try to bring a karban betara. Because even though, again, tumah hutra b'tzivur, you could offer it up, you can't eat anything in a state of tumah. Qualification number two, Rabbi say, is with a karban that doesn't have a set time. See, and this is fascinating. And it's actually intuitive. Rav Nachman will say, when do we say tumah hutra b'tzivur? When, Rabbi will say, when? When you have to offer up the karban when? Now. But if there's time flexibility with the karban, then what? Logic would dictate what? Try to do a petara. And even Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman, who says, Tuma Hutra B'tzibor, of course, again, that's when you have to offer it, and you have to offer it now. But if there's flexibility, like, for example, this Parav Avodah Zarah, where I know I have to offer it, but if I could wait a little bit of time and get something that's tahar, of course I would prefer to do that. Furthermore, again, Elim, the Elim in the Braisa, Be'elo Shel Aaron. That refers to the special ram offering of Aaron offered up on Yom Kippur. The Afagav Tikvia Leizman, even though again have to be offered up on Yom Kippur, Kevan Diyachitu Madrinon. The Ayil of Aaron is considered to be not a communal offering, but is considered to be a private offering. Rav Nachman will say Tomah Hutra B'tzibor works for communal offerings, but not for private offerings. Kvasim. What about the case of Kvasim? Bekeves Haba'im HaOmer Di'ika Shirayim La'achila. So the Kvasim refers to the Keves, the lamb that comes together with the Karban Omer. And once it comes to Karban Omer, ultimately again we have a Shirayim, a consumption issue. So we'll say, so really incredible. See, now we begin to see, just keep this all in mind. See, even Rav Nachman, who holds Tumah Hutra B'tzibor, will say, yes, that is true, but only when there's not a consumption component. Because Tumah Hutra B'tzibor only allows you to offer, doesn't allow you to consume. And number two, Tumah Hutra B'tzibor is only when the karban must be offered now. But if halach l'mayis, you have time flexibility, of course you should try to find something tahar to offer up. Nasi, another kachon on Nachman. Dam shenitma bezarko b'shogeg hurtza b'mezid lo hurtza. Interesting case, I will say. So halach l'mayis, dam which was offered up, dam shenitma, if sacrificial blood became tamei, v'zarku, and you ended up doing zrik, you ended up applying to the mizbeach, b'shogeg hurtza, if you applied it b'shogeg, ex post facto, it works. In other words, the dam is able to affect tara. B'mezid lo hurtza. But if you intentionally sprinkled blood which was tamei on the mizbeach, it does not affect atonement. So I will say, once again, there seems to be a pretty clear kasha against Rav Nachman. According to Rav Nachman, whether you sprinkled the blood intentionally or unintentionally, it should work, right? Because Rav Nachman holds Tumah Hutra B'tzibor, to which the Gemara says, no, Kitanya hi di yochid. The Braisa will say it's not referring to communal offerings; it's referring to a karban yachid. Karban yachid, halacha l'maisa. I understand Tumah is not Hutra B'tzibor. Well, Tumah is not Hutra. Good. Tashma. We'll say now this is an incredible case which is going to open up a whole nother discussion. Al mahat tzitz meratzeh. So I will say the tzitz. Remember again, what's the tzitz? The tzitz is the golden forehead plate that the Kohen Gadol wears. It's one of the unique begadim of the Kohen Gadol. And on it says Kodesh LaHashem. No machlokes. Machlokes, how Kodesh LaHashem was written. Was it written, we'll see this actually in Yoma. Was it written on one line? Was it written on two lines? Okay, it says Kodesh LaHashem. So the tzitz has the ability to affect atonement for certain things. So Amah tzitz miratzeh, what does the tzitz affect atonement for? Al hadam, va'al habasar, va'al hachilev, shenitma, bein b'shogeg, bein ba'onis, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, bein ba'onis, bein baratzin, bein biyachid, bein betzibor. So Shabbos said this is pretty incredible. The tzitz is pretty powerful, right? What does the tzitz affect atonement for? If you did if you sprinkled blood, if you sprinkled really tamei blood, whether you did it, right? I should say it differently. The tzitz is meratza for dam, basar, and chelef, right? Blood, sacrificial fat, sacrificial meat that became tamei. Whether it became tamei intentionally, unintentionally, ones beratzen. Yochid tzibor, then the tzitz is miratze for it. The Rabbi Sina asks the Gemara, V'i sakadayin tchotuma hetri b'tzibor, lama leila ratzuye. The Rabbi said, that whole list is fine except for one thing, which is tzibor. Blood, chelev, basar of the tzibor. If you hold that tumas hutra b'tzibor, then Rabbi said, I don't need what? I don't need the tzitz. Right? I understand if you tell me that the tzitz affects atonement for dam, basar, chelev of a yachid, but if you hold tumah chutra b'tzibor, I don't need the tzitz. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Amar l'charav Nachman, ki katani atzitz meratza adi yachid. You're right. In other words, the Brisa means to say that the tzitz is meratza on the yachid. Good. The other possibility is, afilu tema b'tzibor, bahanach delo kavia leizman. Oh. But say, what did we just get finished saying? That Rav Nachman, who holds Tumah Hutra B'tzibor, really only holds that when you have a carbon that is time-bound. But if a carbon is not time-bound, even Rav Nachman will agree, you should try to find a tar alternative. Rav Nachman says when the Brisa says that the tzitz is meratza on a carbon tzibor, that can mean for a carbon tzibor that does not have a specific time. So even though, again, you should have found a proper tahar replacement, if you did not, and you still offered it up, halacha l'maisa, the carbon, the tzitz is maratza, the tzitz affects atonement. So Meisvei, the Gemara is the kasha, v'nasa Aron es avon hakadoshim, v'chi eiza avon hu nosei. So we'll say, let's analyze this. The pasuk says, Aaron will go ahead and carry upon his forehead the iniquity of the sacrificial items. So both say, this is about the tzitz still, right? That when Aaron wears the tzitz, ultimately again the tzitz atones. So let's analyze this. Says the Gemara, v'chi eiza avon hu nosei. What avon, what avera is the tzitz? What does the tzitz is the tzitz meratze? Does the tzitz atone for? So the Gemara says im avon pigul. If you want to say it's pigul, what's pigul? That's when the Kohen is doing the avoda and he has some erroneous mindset. Either again to consume the carbon outside of the permitted time, to offer it up in a non-permitted way, whatever it was. So I will say, if you want to tell me that tzitz is meratze, atones for pigul, that's not true. Hari kivar ne'emar lo yiratzeh. Both say there is nothing which can atone for pigul. Right? Once a Kohen goes ahead and is mefagel, that's the verb. Right? Once the Kohen is mefagel, once the Kohen goes ahead and does pigul, carbon is ruined. Vim avon nosar. Maybe you'll say that tzitz is meratzeh for nosar. We'll say, what's nosar? Leaving carbon over past its prescribed time. Maybe you want to say that tzitz is meratzeh for that. No. So the Gemara is hari kvar ne'emar lo yichashev. You both say, interestingly enough, you can't atone for pigul and you can't atone for nosar. Which you will say, by the way, if you think about this, it's such an incredible musar, right? You will say, what's pigul? What's pigul? Pigul is just a thought. You will say, you know what the hardest thing to correct in life is? The hardest thing are your machshavas. Right? You could correct actions, right? Because again, I can modify behaviors. Changing the way I think and rewiring my mind to think in a different way is so incredibly difficult. But you know what else is difficult to rectify? Almost impossible to rectify? No, sir. People say, what does no, sir mean? No, sir means you leave something over. When you don't take advantage of your life opportunities and you just let them sit out there, even if one day you wake up and you decide to go ahead, you know, I'd really like to take advantage of that opportunity. More often than not, when you let life opportunities pass you by the time you're ready to take advantage of them, the door has closed, the ship has sailed, and there's nothing really more you can do. You cannot be mechaper for nosar. Which I will say why in life, don't let beautiful opportunities become nosar. Don't let them sit. Because the moment you let them sit, even if one day I decide to wake up, all too often they're gone. So the Gemara says, so what is the tzitz meratza for? Right? So what is exactly that the tzitz atones for? Amadeus, ha eno no say, ella avon tuma. Ella avon tuma. We'll say, so it must be that the tzitz is meratza for tuma. right? That if a carbon was offered up in a state of tumah, right, accidentally, intentionally, the tzitz has the ability to atone for that. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry, ha'inonose ela avon tumah shehutra michlala b'tzibor. So I will say it must be that what is the tzitz miratza for? The tzitz is miratza for a type of tumah that would not be problematic in the context of a tzibur. So we'll say, what does this mean? What the Gemara is trying to suggest is, remember, this brisa is working with a supposition, right? Which is that Allah l'maisa tumah b'tzibur. Tumah b'tzibur. That's what this brisa is operating off of. Therefore, what is the tzitz miratza for Abosai? So tumah b'tzibur. Therefore, communal tumah does not need the tzitz. Because at the end of the day, communal tumah is mutter, so to speak. You understand what I mean when I say that? So what is the tzitz miratza for? Tumas yachid. Tumas yachid. Right? That if an individual offered up his carbon unknowingly in a state of tumah, then Allah Almighty the tzitz is miratza for the kashil Rav Sheshas. So I will say now, this up until now we've been asking kashas on Rav Nachman. This brisa now poses a kasha on Rav Sheshas, because Rav Sheshas held what? What was Rav Sheshas' position? Tuma dechuya b'tzibor. The brisa clearly indicates to us that Allah l'maisa tuma hutra b'tzibor. So it's a kasha of Sheshes. To which the Gemara says tanaihi. In reality, this whole thing is just a machlokes. And I will say again, what one of the most famous machloksim in Shas is tuma hutra tuma dechuya b'tzibor. That's a fundamental machlokes. To which the Gemara says this is not just Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. This is a machlokes tanoim. Here we go. This sanya sits. Bein sheyeshna mitzcha, bein sheyeshna mitzcha miratza. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. The tzitz, whether it's on your forehead, not on your forehead, affects atonement. Affects atonement. These are the words of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Huda says, Odel al mitzcha miratza. Rabbi Huda says, if the tzitz is on my forehead, on the Kohen Gadol's forehead, then it affects atonement. Ein odal mitzcha, if the tzitz is not on, if it's not on the Kohen Gadol's forehead, then ultimately, again, it doesn't affect atonement. Amr Shimon Kohen Gadol. Amr Shimon says, Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur Yochiach. So we'll say the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur will prove. Why? She'ein odal mitzcha. So we'll say it's very interesting. The Kohen Gadol does not wear the tzitz on Yom Kippur. Why doesn't the Kohen Gadol wear the tzitz on Yom Kippur? I will say, why not? The tzitz is gold, right? The tzitz is gold. The Kohen Gadol does not wear big day zav. He does not wear golden clothing on Yom Kippur, right? This is the actually we'll say it's all going to be Yoma. In kategar naaseh sanegar. The prosecutor cannot become the defender. Gold, Rabbi say again, we'll see, always conjures up historical memories of the Cheta Egel. On Yom Kippur specifically, again, where the Kohen Gadol's job is to advocate for atonement for Klal Yisrael, nothing gold. That's why, again, he only wears big day lavan. So you see on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol doesn't wear the tzitz, yet we assume that Allah l'maisu meratza, but yet the tzitz still affects atonement, even when the Kohen Gadol is not wearing it. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda hanach al Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim shetuma hutra lo b'tzibur. So also Rabbi Yehuda says, don't bring up Yom Kippur. Don't bring up Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a different discussion. Why is Yom Kippur a different discussion? Because on Yom Kippur, everything on Yom Kippur is communal service. Right? To say there is no carbon yachid. Although again, it's not totally true because Aaron himself, the Kohen Gadol, would offer up certain individual karbanos. But Allah L'maisa, the avodah on Yom Kippur has the status of avodas tzibur and tuma hutra b'tzibur. Now, both say that's the Gemara. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Michad Rabbi Shimon Savar tuma dechoyehi b'tzibur, which we both say tells us that if Rabbi Yehuda holds tuma hutra b'tzibur, that apparently Rabbi Shimon holds tuma dechuya b'tzibur. So we both say you see from here that halacha l'maisa, this in fact is a machlokes tanoim. So we'll say I'll tell you something interesting. So how do we paskin? Because we'll say this is a yisodistic machlokes. So how do we paskin? See, interestingly enough, let me see if I could pull it up here quickly. If I could pull it up quickly, I'll just say this outside. So we'll say the Rambam paskins that halacha l'maisa tuma dechuya b'tzibor. That's how the Rambam paskins tuma dechuya b'tzibor, which effectively tells us that whenever there is the possibility to go ahead and offer up to find either a replacement. I will say, so I'll just tell you that I'm actually, very quickly, the Rambam goes through a couple of these cases. Well, remember we saw in yesterday's daf that one of the interesting nafkaminas was, remember again, how many mishmaros of the kuna, let's go a little chazar, how many mishmaros? 24, excellent. each mishmar served a week at a time at the Beis HaMikdash. Each mishmar was made up of multiple batei avos, which are families. Right? So you had any number of families serving on a particular day, and they divided up the avodah of that particular day. So remember again, we saw the case. What happens if one of the kohanim, one of the batei avos becomes tamei? What do you do with him? What do you do with him? It depends. What does it depend on? Right? Do you hold Tumah Hutra or Tumah Dechuya? If you hold Tumah Hutra, let him go. It's okay. It's anything that's communal, he could do. If you hold Tumah Dechuya, then what do? Find a replacement. The Rambam Paskins, find a replacement. Find a replacement. So we'll say, and again, the Rambam goes through all of the cases of our Gemara. So Allah Lamaisa, we Paskin Tumah Dechuya Betzibor, which means that whenever there is a tamei situation, we do our best to rectify it and to offer up the carbon in a state of tara, to use kohanim who are in a state of tara. Obviously, if you cannot find that, let's say all of the kohanim become tameim, right? Or there is no ability to find, for example, another batch of barley. Ultimately, again, for the Karban HaOmer, where you have no alternative, you can, in fact, do the avoda in a state of tumah. But lechatchila, tumah dechuya b'tzibor, we try to find a tar alternative. If that's not available, you can move forward in the state of tumah. Incredible. Then I will say, now the Gemara opens up another sugya. Now that we brought up the tzitz, so I will say the Gemara is going to go on this way. This is incredible. I'm going to Abaye. We'll say this is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Amr Abaye. B'nish barat tzitz. So what happens if the tzitz breaks? Right? Chas v'shalom, the tzitz breaks. So I'll say, now remember again, we now begin to see, it appears, what is the primary role of the tzitz in the Beis HaMikdash? What's the primary role? It affects Tara. Right? That's the primary role. What the tzitz does, tzitz is like carbonic insurance. Right? So what happens? You want carbon insurance. What's your carbon insurance? Well, so you need insurance for everything. Right? What's carbon insurance? Somebody should tell the insurance guys, this is going to be the industry. Right? Because let's say, think about this for just a moment, right? You're thinking about, all kidding aside, you're coming from Modi'in to Yerushalayim. You want to bring your animal with you. Let's say again, you want to purchase an animal. So the tzitz was spiritual carbon insurance. It ensures that if somehow something becomes tamei, the coin becomes tamei, the carbon becomes tamei, and let's say unknowingly they go through this whole process and they offer it up. So the tzitz is miratza. The tzitz affects atonement ultimately again for tumah. So the Gemara now says, if the tzitz breaks, so kuli alma lo pligi de lo miratza. So we'll say if the tzitz breaks, then of course it cannot affect atonements. Right? That makes sense, because if the tzitz breaks, then what? There's no tzitz. So where does the machloki? So this is incredible. Ki pligi, the tali b'sichsa. We'll say, what happens if the tzitz is not broken, it's in existence, but literally translated, it's hanging on a peg. So we'll say, which means is that it's in existence, but what? The Kohen's not wearing it. So you hear the shaila, the tzitz exists, but the Kohen's not wearing it. Does that tzitz affect atonement or not? So we'll say this is the machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda Savra al meitzach v'nasa. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Well, it's an off in the pasuk, right? It's mefurish pasuk. The pasuk says Aaron will wear it on his forehead and bear the iniquity, or lift up, or atone. So obviously, in order for the tzitz to be activated, the Kohen has to be wearing it. Rabbi Shimon Savar Tamid l'ratzon lifnei Hashem. Rabbi Shimon says the tzitz must be perpetually before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My tamid, ilema tamad al mitzcho. If you say tamid means that the Kohen always has to be wearing the tzitz, that's not possible. Mi mishkachasa, we'll say the Kohen can never be perpetually wearing the tzitz. Mi lo bay lamela beis hakisei. Does the Kohen not have to go to the bathroom? We'll say he can't wear the tzitz into the bathroom. Umi lo bay meinam. Does the Kohen not need to sleep? So we'll say obviously tamid can't mean that the Kohen always wears the tzitz. Ela tamid miratzu. Rather, again, what Rabbi Shimon says is, as long as the tzitz, tamid means as long as the tzitz is in existence. As long as the tzitz exists, even if the Kohen's not wearing it, it has the ability to affect Tumah. So you hear this fundamental machlokes? Fundamental machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda holds the tzitz is only meratza when the Kohen's wearing it. Rabbi Shimon says no. As long as the tzitz is in existence, it's meratza. But say, what's the nafkamina? Like we just said, the tzitz is hanging on a peg. It's in the Beis HaMikdash, it's hanging on a peg. So it's in existence, it is in existence, but the Kohen is not wearing it. So here we go. Says the Gemara, Ul Rabbi Huda nami haksiv tamid. So we'll say Rabbi Huda holds that the kohen has to be wearing the tzitz. What does he do with the fact that the pasuk does say tamid? It does say that the tzitz is miratza perpetually, and obviously perpetually can't mean that the kohen is wearing it perpetually, because the kohen can't wear it perpetually. So what does he do with tamid? Oh, Rabbi say this is incredible. Hahu tamid shelo yasiach daito mimenu. We'll say Rabbi Huda says tamid means that whenever the kohen is wearing the tzitz, he must not have hesach hadas. Right? He must be aware of the presence of the tzitz. Kidirabba barafuna, damra barafuna. But listen to how beautiful this is. Chayiv adam lamashmish betfilah b'chol shah. We'll say a person is obligated to touch his tefillin at all times. Why? Kavachomer mitzitz. And it's a kavachomer from the tzitz. What's the kavachomer? Top of ches. Umatzitz she'in bo elas kara achos. Amra Torah mitzcho tamid shelo yasiach daito mimenu. Both say the tzitz has only one name of Hashem on it. Only one name of Hashem. Yet what does the Torah say? V'haya ametzcho tamid. It shall be on his forehead perpetually. And the Gemara understands what that means is Kohen. Whenever you are wearing the tzitz, you must be focused on the tzitz. You cannot have hesach hadas. Tefillin, sheyesh ban askaras harbe alachas kama v'kama. Tefillin abose, which has many names of Hashem in it, all the more so that I have to be focused ultimately on tefillin, which abose is actually a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, that a person really is not supposed to go ahead and have a lapse of awareness when wearing tefillin, which is probably something most of us have to try to be, include myself in this, have to try to be a little bit better. You'll see some people who are very makbid on this, Rabbosai, will not have any unrelated conversations while wearing tefillin. And if they do so, will dafka, let's say for example, lift up their shalrosh, or move the shalrosh out of place. This way, again, if a person has to speak about something unrelated to tefillin or unrelated to tefillah, it's keilu they're not wearing their tefillin. But again, it's certainly something that we have to try to be a bit more makbid on. That you see it, it's a Gemara that the tefillin is learned out from tzitz. And if tzitz, which only has one name of Hashem on it, a person has to be perpetually occupied, right? Constantly thinking about the tzitz, then tefillin, which has multiple names of the Ribono Shel Olam, how much we have to be focused on the mitzvah of tefillin when we have the schus to wear our tefillin. Ulu Rabbi Shimon, I'll also just do another line. Ulu Rabbi Shimon, do Amar Tamid Miratza. So we'll say, so that's how, say for Rabbi Huda who holds that the tzitz is only Miratza when the Kohen is wearing it. Al Metzcho V'nasa, what does he do with the phrase Tamid L'Ratzon? Tamid teaches you that when you're wearing the tzitz, you must what? Be fully concentrating on the tzitz. Ul Rabbi Shimon Damar Tamid Miratza v'hai ksiv al metzcho v'nasa. And according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the tzitz is miratza all the time, even when the kohen is not wearing it. As long as the tzitz is in existence, it affects atonement. What does he do with the phrase of al metzcho? Right, the pasuk says pretty explicitly that the kohen has to be wearing the tzitz on his forehead. What does he do with that? To which the Gemara says, Hahu likboa lo makom hu da'asa. According to Rabbi Shimon, say al metzcho comes to teach you what? Where to wear the tzitz. Doesn't teach you about how the tzitz is miratza, right? That pasuk doesn't teach you how the tzitz affects atonement. From Tamid L'Ratzon, I learned how the tzitz affects atonement. How does the tzitz affect atonement? Rabbi say how? Just by being in existence. So what is al metzcho? What does it mean when it says Aaron has to wear it on his forehead? That teaches you what? Where Aaron has to wear it. That's what it teaches me. That Aaron has to wear. I don't know where to wear. How do I know where to wear the tzitz? Right, without a pasuk, I don't know where to put the tzitz. So again, al mitzcho teaching that Aaron puts it on his forehead. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda. So where does Rabbi Yehuda likbo l'makom another? Where does Rabbi Yehuda learn out where to put the tzitz? So nafkalei me al mitzcho. Ultimately, again, he learns it out from ultimately placing on from al mitzcho. So we'll say, we'll stop over here. We'll pick up ultimately with Rabbi Yehuda tomorrow. But we'll say, just understand what we're leaving off with. This is a pretty riveting place to leave off, right? We're leaving off with a fundamental. Remember, just to trace the progression. The progression over here, we had Tuma Hutra, Tuma Dechuya, right? That we saw again Machlokes Rav Nachman, Rav Sheshes, Machlokes Tanaim, Rambam Paskins, Tuma Dechuya. In that discussion, we brought up tzitz. Once we brought up tzitz, Abaye said, let's talk about the tzitz. And let's talk about, again, exactly the mechanics of how the tzitz is miratza. Does the tzitz have to be on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol in order to be miratza? Or does the mere existence of the tzitz affect atonement as well? The nafkamina case will be that sits is hanging on a peg. Does it affect atonement or not? Machlokes, Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Huda says Kohen's got to be wearing it. I keep going like this. I don't know. You're probably wondering why am I going like this? Because it goes on its forehead, right? So I'll say, so again, Rabbi Huda says he has to be wearing it in order for it to affect atonement. Rabbi Shimon says no, as long as it's in existence, ultimately, again, it affects atonement. Now the Gemara is getting into the discussion about how everyone darshans their respective psukim. We'll continue with those drashos as well as the halacha l'maisa tomorrow. Let's say shkoyach. Oh, bench. Does somebody want to leave? All right, Chevron on Zoom. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful day. Schus learn with all of you. Thank you, Ashi.